Where are the pals? Oh, there you are. You mind leading us in the invocation, please?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity we have to gather together. Lord, we pray that you'll bless each and every one that's in attendance, and the decisions and discussions that are made will be pleasing to you. Lord, we pray for our county, for our cities, and for our nation. And we pray that you'll keep your hand on us and guide us in the direction you have us to go. In Christ's name we ask.
Amen.
Amen.
Dale, you mind leading us in the pledge? Flags back here.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. You may be seated. We want to kind of rehash a couple of things here, and then we'll talk about some things here locally in Catoosa County as well. But in Walker County last month, we had a information form, as most of you all know, that we're converting from a sub-commissioner to a board of commissioners in Walker County. It'll be a 5-member board where we'll have 4 districts and 1 at-large chairman who will run the day-to-day operations. And we had that information form, and we had several how many total candidates do we have for the board? I think we had
About 14 total.
14 total, counting district, the House seats and the Senate seat and all that. But we had about 100 people show up. It was a good forum. We've had people that's talked to, and we worked with David Roden's group, the Walker County Wilson Road group, and we thought that was a great partnership to do on the north end. So we've been approached to do some more of that. So that's what we're looking at, and that's what our organization wants to do. We want to partner with other organizations that share some of the same goals that we have, and have more openness and more accountability, and hold our elected officials accountable to the principles that we all share and that we all believe in. But my question is, and I'll start with the board members because some are here, our candidates here now, is what we're looking at doing is having debates, big more forums than debates, in each of the 4 districts to allow the citizens of those districts to get to know those candidates for the Board of Commissioners better. Is that something that you candidates might be interested in? Mr. Morehouse, what do you think? I see you nodding your head.
Yes, sir, I do.
We would probably start them in January because qualifying is in March. March is qualifying with the primary in May. So, and of course, some may not we may not know who all the candidates are if they wait to qualify late. But we thought that we could start in Rossville again with District 1 and then go to Chickamauga with District 2. Now, as of right now, I think there's only 1 candidate in District 3. So that's something we have to look at. And what we were thinking about doing is rather than holding, because you have so many candidates, then when it came to District 53, the Senate seat, and the at-large chairman, which would of course encompass all the entire county, that we would just hold that in one location one time, like maybe at the Civic Center or someplace in the center of the county around Rock Springs, and try to do that if we can get cooperation with all that. How do you feel about that, Mr. Nobley?
That would be good for me.
Okay. Well, we'll talk to you all about that more in detail as we move forward with that. But that's what we're looking at doing next year, is having these information or forums for the candidates. Because people still don't understand, most people do, but still there's a lot of people who don't quite understand how this Board of Commissioners is going to work. And our goal is to make sure everybody understands it as well as possible. I did put the map up in the back, so if anybody wants to see where they are in Walker County as far as what district you might be in, the map is back there for you to see. And each district contains approximately 17,200 people. And as you can tell from the map, Rossville is much more densely populated than the west side of the county is. That whole big green area back there is the same population size as the north end with Rossville. So that shows you how densely populated Rossville is compared to the rest of the county. But all the population pretty much in Walker County is on the east side and on the north side, Chickamauga and Northwood. So that's a little bit of a challenge, but that's the only way that map basically could be drawn, and it was redrawn several times to get where it's at now. This next thing that we want to talk about is what's going on in Catoosa County. Who wants to kind of give us a fill-in on what's going on, Joanne? I mean, I heard you've been gone. You want to kind of fill us in on what's going on in Catoosa County? What's the big upset and uproar?
Well, the big upset is about the public speaking.
Well, stand up so I can hear you.
I'm not a public speaker.
Well, you're gonna learn to be
I
one.
just everybody knows you'll have to forgive me, I've learned things out.
You're fine.
But our big problem right now is our chairman decided that he would be a dictator instead of the chairman. And he has wrote some rules, and I brought them to y'all. A fourth grader could have done a better job, but it takes 5 men and probably 6 officials to write out 3 paragraphs that only a dummy could understand. And that's where we are now, because they're trying to prohibit us from speaking out in the open, where we used to just have to raise our hand. And we had 5 minutes to speak, that's the law. And they decided, because several of us done a little number on them about a little road tax thing, they take people that are good off of boards in this county and get them out. That's a revenge thing. And like I told the chairman, I got your message loud and clear. You're gonna get mine May the 19th, 2020. Thank you. And that's what's going on. Besides, the spending is out of control in Catoosa County. And everybody lives in that county really needs to keep an eye on what they're doing, and that's all I've got to say. I've got records of everything they do. So anything I say is the truth, because it comes out of that building, if you can believe it. Thank you.
Well, you know, we had a similar situation with we had a similar situation with our school board in Walker County, where there was a lawsuit involved with them. And,
They lost.
and they lost the lawsuit.
Twice, I believe.
Twice the lawsuit,
We
where,
may have to hunt
where the,
Barbara up.
the chairman of the school board was basically restricting speech and questions. I don't remember the details about it, but I know there was a couple of lawsuits, and I think he appealed it and he lost again, so that might be something you might want to follow up on and see how that went, and use that over in Catoosa County, because,
Well, we're protesting on the street now with our own signs about everything they're doing. So anybody wants to protest on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays from 4 to 5, you're welcome to join us.
okay, fantastic. Joanne, you want to tell everybody about our upcoming Christmas party? Then we'll get Alex up.
Well, what am I going to do with this video?
Hand it over to somebody else.
Just a quick note, we are going to have our first annual Christmas party, and it'll be right here in this building. It'll be a bring a dish, or a $10 donation, but no, I think that's out the window. Just bring a dish. And we look forward to seeing you, and I'll pass these out to everybody that you can put on your refrigerator to remind you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, this is all about relationship building. We need to do that. We all need to know each other. It's best, we all have to work together to make a difference in our communities, and that's what we want to do. So these Christmas parties are good about that, so we can get to build relationships and work with each other and trust each other on things that need to be done in Catoosa and in Walker County. But anyhow, I invited Alex Johnson. Well, I'll give them a minute to pass that out. And of course, we have, I know he don't know I'm going to do this to him, but we also have Ed Painter, our former 14th District Chairman, who I think did a fantastic job when he was in there. He made some people angry, but you do that when you do things effectively sometimes. You want to give us an update on anything, or do you have anything to update us on?
All I can say is we're facing the same struggle with taxes all around. So, you know, you can help your neighbors in the next county or something, think about doing that too, because it's everywhere, all over the district.
Right.
More taxes, more spending.
And everybody that has run for office or is running for office, I just want to personally let you know, whether you won or lost, that you have my deep appreciation. Running for office is not an easy thing to do. You get criticized for it. It takes up a lot of time to do that. And it's one of those things that is not, what's the word, you kind of get what you ask for. You don't exactly get appreciated a lot of times for the efforts that you put in when you run for public office. And these new board members in Walker County, My fear is you're gonna find out very quickly that it might not be worth that $1,000 a month you're being paid to be a chairman of Walker County. But, I think our government works best when we have our citizens involved in it. And it is gonna come down to the caliber of the people that run for these positions are elected. I'm expecting there'll be some bumps in the road, but I don't think it's not gonna be anything that we can survive and work through, in our county. But anyway, I invited Alex Johnson up here this evening because a lot of the goals and the ideas and thoughts and mental attitude that he has with his organization, with the Republican Party Assembly, is very similar to what we're doing. Of course, we're nonpartisan, but very similar in nature and very similar to what our goals are. So I wanted to invite him up here to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, and then we'll give you a few minutes to ask some questions. He came all the way up here from Dunwoody, down there around Atlanta, which I think is the San Francisco of the South. But I'm sure he may even have a few things to say about that. Well, if you would, welcome Alex Johnson.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm Alex Johnson. I'm the president of the Georgia Republican Assembly. Now, how many of you in here are involved in the Republican Party, like just the organization stuff? So, all right, so most of you. How many of you have been to the state convention before? All right, so a little bit under half. Well, I got involved in the GOP back around, first in college as a college Republican. Then I got involved in the CAB Republican Party around 2009 while I was in law school. I went to law school down at Georgia State. And I got involved in DeKalb County, Blue County, trying to think, well, I'm going to get involved, try to help grow Republicanism. And what happened was sort of disheartening. After about 3 years, what ended up happening is I realized that the GOP, at least in DeKalb, seemed to just support anyone that had a R next to their name. And then when a whole bunch of new people, young people, showed up around the 2012 presidential election, the party went from wanting new people involved to then saying, yeah, we don't want you here, get out. And they didn't just say that verbally, they did it by breaking party rules. They did everything they could to use Robert's Rules of Order in the party system to keep out new people. And I heard that happen in other parts of the state. Now, as I was speaking to a gentleman about earlier tonight, one very strong motivator to changing things in politics is being angry. And that really pissed me off. I mean, you're involved spending time supporting Republican, like I was thinking you vote Republican, you get good results, and then realizing that not only was that not happening, but the party was sort of using that against new people. And it was why I wasn't seeing lower taxes coming from Republicans in office. I wasn't seeing less spending. I was seeing larger and larger government and less accountability. So that caused me to get more and more involved. I ran for party chairman in 2013 for the state party, ran 3 times and sequentially got a little bit more each time. Last time was in 17, it got about like 47% or something, very close. But ever since 2015, I became president, I think late 2015, early 2016, of a group called the Georgia Republican Assembly. It's part of a national group called the National Federation of Republican Assemblies. It started originally in California, and it helped get, it started, I think, under when Goldwater was big, and then they helped get Reagan elected, both governor and then president, in California. And it went nationwide, I think sometime around the 80s, and then it had chapters in various states. Its goal, and our goal, is to get principled Republican people, like people who truly believe in Republican principles, into party office and into public office. So both being in leadership positions in the Georgia GOP or the California GOP or the Kansas GOP, all the different state GOPs and then the national GOP, as well as making sure that our elected officials are actually Republican and they're accountable to those principles. Unlike most Republican groups, the Georgia Republican Assembly endorses in contested primaries. It will get involved when, for example, if commissioners are pushing a SPLOST or a tax increase, the Republican assemblies will turn around and take a stand and say we're generally opposed to that. Opposed to tax increases. And this isn't something that's about me or the state level of the Republican Assembly. This is it's all volunteer. This position on my part is completely volunteer. My business, the way I make money, is through a legal practice suing the government when they violate people's constitutional rights, suing insurance companies, personal injury claims, and then representing some small businesses. Nothing I do comes from politics. And that's important because when you start analyzing the system, like what's wrong with the system? Why is it that all these elected officials sell us out? Why is it that a lot of times party officials on the national level, or just that they sometimes don't do what they're supposed to? Look at where the money's coming from. Look at where they make their money. If someone makes their money through consulting for politicians, meaning getting them elected, selling the signs, doing all that, like that doesn't mean that they aren't going to be principled. But it means that you need to follow it to figure out, like, is that why they are saying, well, we don't want to criticize Commissioner so-and-so, and we don't want to be opposed to this tax increase? Is that because they think there's a good reason to be in favor of a tax increase? Or is it because that commissioner is the one who writes them checks for getting them elected, and if they stand up and say, we're opposed to this tax increase, they're afraid of losing the money flow? That's something that's really important to pay attention to. Now, the Georgia Republican Assembly, going back to the organization, is fully volunteer. All of us are volunteers. Everybody on the state board's a volunteer. On the national level, it's volunteers. It's all a volunteer organization. For example, I know that a SPLOST in this area, which was defeated, the local Republican Assembly made the decision to go against it. And the local Republican Assembly got the signs, put the logo on those signs, and advertised against it, and then defeated the tax increase, defeated that SPLOST. I had nothing to do with making that decision from the state level. I live in DeKalb County. That's part of the organization, is it's grassroots. Local chapters run their business. If there's a candidate locally, the local members of the Republican Assembly endorse or don't endorse in those races, so that other people know who the actual Republican is in the races. You'll hear a lot of times what people will say is they'll say, well, you know, and this is something that I think needs to change in the party. Some states, like I think Virginia's one, where the party actually, when they have conventions, they have the option to say, this is the Republican. That isn't what happens in Georgia. If you talk to most people that are heavily involved in the party in Georgia, and I hate to use the word establishment, but I think everyone knows what that means. The people who, like, that have been involved in it a while, they'll often say, well, we stay out of this race until after the primary. Now, one thing when it comes down to transparency is to think about what that means. If you stay out of a race until after the primary, what does that mean? Like, if the people who are most informed, most educated, most paying attention to politics, which I mean most of this room, stays out of a primary and waits till the general, what does that mean? Well, it means that the main thing people in the public are going to hear about are candidates that have a lot of money, that have a lot of money flowing into their coffers, that can advertise, hire people, put out just put out a big public perception. So who are those people going to be? They're going to be the people who are backed by politicians who just want them to go along. They'll be backed by sort of the industries that make money off the government. Like, for example, transportation tax increases will get a lot of money oftentimes from Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, other special interests and groups that want to see tax increases, that want to see more government spending. And all of that money flows into their coffers, and they're the ones that everyone hears about, so then they win the primary. Then what happens in the general when, you know, you're saying, well, I don't like this guy, he's, you know, like to use a term, rhino, or not really a Republican. The response is, well, he won the primary, so sit there and knock on doors for him and have a nice day. That kills volunteerism. That mindset destroys the ability of people getting involved and inspiring people to get involved. Like me just saying that, I even felt myself less inspired just thinking about the idea of being told, like, support this guy because he has an R next to his name, but don't get involved in the primary because, well, that's, you know, like, that's not our job as a party. And I think that's what needs to change. And that's one of the things that the Georgia Republican Assembly is leading by example on. I mean, we are not the GOP. Our members are all Republican, but we are not the GOP. We get involved in primaries. We have our local chapters endorse and say who we want in public office and in party office. And it's not me doing it. I rarely have a vote because I'm usually chairing the meetings. It comes down to the members making that decision, the people who join the organization. So if all of that is something that you're all interested in, I'd encourage all of you to join the Georgia Republican Assembly. We actually also, like, the thing is that we try to keep out people. I mean, you apply to join, we've rarely had to reject people, but we had to reject a few who we knew of as being sort of consultants or lobbyist types that were making money and were leaning towards the establishment side. And when I say establishment side, I want to make it clear that this is not a high bar, but I mean, for example, if you think that it's okay for, I mean, in one example of a race, I don't know, how many of you have heard the name Ken Pullen? Have any of you heard of Ken? All right, a few of you have, a few Republican Assembly members. So he's a Republican Assembly member. He's out for Pike County. He's a state representative. He ran in the last election, like I think it was 2 years ago, he ran against a guy named Johnny Caldwell. Johnny Caldwell was previously a judge. He called himself a Republican. He was a state rep. He was a judge. He was accused of, and this was in like court transcripts, there was some deposition transcripts about this, where he was apparently like saying some things that were allegedly sexist and somehow hitting on or making sexually charged comments to female attorneys that were practicing in front of him. This made national news. It was on like a Samantha Bee video, and it was a big scandal, and the Judicial Watchdog Agency in Georgia went and said, look, you shouldn't be doing this, and he stepped down as a judge. He then ran to be a state rep. This is Johnny Caldwell we're talking about. He became a state rep. He was then put in charge on some judicial committee in the state house. And he's representing the Republican name. Ken Pullen, really good family guy, went and primaried him. He started knocking on doors very early. Caldwell, from State House leadership, including I think one of their favorite people in the room, and I'm saying that sarcastically, David Ralston, gave, I think, maxed out donations to him. A lot of committee chairs, maxed out donations to Johnny Caldwell. Johnny Caldwell raised, I think it was, he outraised Ken Pullen like 3 or 4 to 1. Ken Pullen won the primary, luckily, with the support of the RA. He was endorsed by the RA, our members supported him, got out and did that. But when you think of the establishment, think about the fact that someone who clearly made the Republican Party look bad, just notoriously just looked bad, and was disciplined as a judge, was then supported in the tune of tens of thousands of dollars against a good, hardcore conservative, Ken Pullen. All of that money could have been used to support Republicans in more swing districts. But it wasn't. And then we lost seats last cycle in the state house. But that's what Ralston and leadership do. They use that money to keep in their friends who support them and will play along, and use that in primaries against people who are truly conservative people, that are true Republicans. And that's what you see time and time again. I mean, I don't know how many of you, probably a lot of you have heard of Matt Gertler, who's from North Georgia. He got primaried last time, and Ralston and Deal both were supporting the opponent, even though Matt Gertler is pushing constitutional carry. He's clearly pushing like Second Amendment rights. He's pushing limited government, lower spending, all of these things. What ends up happening, you have the establishment backing a challenger to him. Colton Moore, also a Republican Assembly member, I think in this area, I've heard he's already picked up primary challengers. I don't know all the details there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's for the same reason. And I say that knowing that, there's a lot of defenses of the current House Speaker, saying that, I've heard someone tonight say that they've claimed he hasn't done anything bad. Well, I mean, even if the underlying issues aren't bad, which as a lawyer I think they are pretty appalling, I mean, wouldn't all of you agree it's pretty bad that if, in a representative body, when you have people like Ken Pullen and Matt Gertler and Sherry Gilligan and some other reps that go and they say, well, we don't think you're doing a good job as Speaker, don't we all agree that that's wrong to turn around and then pull committee chairmanships and positions from them simply for speaking up, saying their opinion that something the Speaker's doing is wrong? Isn't it a little bit bullying, a little bit just wrong in general? But that's the leadership we currently have. And that type of leadership in politics, in political office, if we don't change it and get rid of it, is going to end up costing us a state. Republicans are not going to win when you have bullying leadership that treats conservative representatives badly. Because the whole point of being a Republican, at least I know the reason why I'm a Republican, is because I believe that our principles should be enacted into law. Like the less taxes, gun rights, pro-life, all of this should be in law. We need to be pushing that forward. We shouldn't be afraid of it. I mean, the left isn't afraid of pushing the idea that, the government should be paying for sex change surgeries. I mean, they aren't ashamed to push for what they want. They aren't ashamed to push for higher taxes, taking away AR-15s, doing these things. Like, they don't hide from those positions. So why is it that when Republicans, and specifically some Republicans, not all, but some Republicans are in power, they're afraid of pushing our principles? Because it's not inspiring. It makes it so people don't want to vote for you if you elect people who then turn around and don't do what they say they're going to do. I mean, I know we're all forced in the situation of, we either vote Republican or we elect socialists right now, like crazy people. But I mean, that's not an excuse for them to not push Republican principles. They should be pushing it so that we get more people voting our way. We need to stand for something in order to get public support and to keep winning elections. So that's what the Republican Assembly is about, is making that happen. Since I've taken over leadership of the Republican Assembly in 2015-16 with 6 members, now we have over 500 members statewide. We went from no local chapters to now we have 10 local chapters around the state, and we're growing. We have an affiliated PAC that actually funds our endorsed candidates. Like, if you get the Republican Assembly endorsement, the GRA PAC donates money to help get them elected or keep those candidates in office. We're operating around the state. We have a committee that's currently being formed. I don't want to go into too much detail since there's video, but we're targeting, trying to take care of the Ralston issue. We also have other committees that vet candidates, and we just are doing a lot around the state. So with that, I definitely want to make sure everybody gets forms that actually you can join, and also just read about the Republican Assembly. But also, I'm open to questions. I know that I've probably forgotten like 50 things, but I will.
Can I add something to your comment about the PAC? If you're a member of the GRA PAC and you've donated at a certain threshold, you actually can participate in conference calls and or email polls so that you have a say in who the overall organization is endorsing. So it's not that even the PAC is doing what they want to do independent of what the members want. You as the member have a voice in the way that your money is being spent at the campaign level. So. Exactly,
and former Congressman Paul Brown is the president of the PAC, and Brent Frost, the 5th, is, I think, the executive director. But it's also, again, just like the GRA is all volunteer, the leaders of the PAC, there is no overhead there. Like the PAC, the money goes directly to candidates, that's all it does. I mean, a lot of you may have heard about a lot of PACs that spend money like 90% on overhead and 10% on candidates. I mean, that's, again, all volunteer, all grassroots, all just trying to have the impact in politics I know that we all want. And having the strength from around the state's really useful, because not every place is as conservative as North Georgia, as opposed to Dunwoody, which we just elected some socialists to city council, which is really depressing. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for donating to actual real conservative Christian moral value candidates in the Republican primary. And Stacey Abrams has vowed to register to vote 375,000 people in the city, in the big cities in Georgia for the 2020 election. And I understand that y'all are going to be getting busy doing the same thing in the rural areas that she's doing in the big city. And thank you for that.
What is it? In response to that, what's really awesome is that just reminded me of the state party. So the Georgia Republican Assembly and the Georgia Republican Party, in a lot of ways, are complementary. Like, the Georgia Republican Assembly is focused on everything that I just talked about. The GOP, we endorsed in the last chairman's race, the one just this year. We endorsed David Schaefer for chairman of the state party. We endorsed Brant Frost for second vice chairman. They both won their races. And their plan during the campaign was about doing what you just talked about, getting local county parties more established, registering more voters, and really creating the grassroots infrastructure necessary to defeat you know, all the Democrats, including Stacey Abrams. So that's something that I forgot to mention, but we definitely had a big impact at the state convention this last year. Maybe it's because I wasn't running, who knows, but it worked out well. Yeah, Dean.
As we all know, Johnny Isaacson is retiring. So how active is the Republican Party Assembly in lobbying our governor on the conservative replacement?
Well, at the last state convention, there was a resolution passed that urged the governor to appoint Paul Brown. That was a resolution that was passed. So a lot of our members have pushed that. If I don't know how many of you know former Congressman Paul Brown, but he's very constitutional conservative. And the Assembly at the last state convention voted to pass that resolution. So a lot of our members have been active talking to him, but I mean, yeah, so that's where it is. So we hope Kemp appoints a good candidate to that office, but we'll see.
Now, would that election be in 2020 for Isaacson's replacement?
Yes, it would be two elections. So it'll be a crazy year next year. It'll be a really crazy year, right? Yes, sir.
If the Republicans don't clean up their corruption, try to cover it up, just like they're doing on this Ralston deal, how bad do you think it might hurt us in the elections coming up next year?
Personally, I think it could be a significant drag, especially in Georgia, because I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that Stacey Abrams came so close last time, it probably wouldn't be so bad. But they see us as a purple state, so the amount of money that's going to flow into the state to put out advertisements and everything like video, newspaper, whatever. I mean, they're going to try everything they can, and the behavior that you see at the state house, the sort of bullying behavior and the allegations regarding delaying criminal cases, that stuff can really. That could cause some real damage in Georgia, I believe. And I think the only way to really counteract it is to have a lot of people paying attention, because most voters, I don't think, have historically paid attention to the inner workings of the Capitol, like how David Ralston gets his position. Because again, it's the state reps that vote to put him in. So the only way you're going to get him out is if the state reps around the state realize that he's a political liability. And seeing as how most pressure on the Capitol, it isn't that well organized historically. That's the problem. That's what we're trying to do with the Republican Assembly, is to get people organized, to really put pressure on the state reps, to let them know that the current behavior down there is going to be a liability for the ticket.
Most of the local reps here are trying to cover up for Ralston instead of cleaning.
Yeah, and that's sort of the problem, is he controls so much money a lot of time. Again, it comes back to the money. If he's the one giving these maxed out donations to reps, they're going to feel beholden to him. The only time, and maybe a second time will happen tonight, but the only time I've ever been yelled at giving a presentation, just like someone in the crowd just got up and started yelling at me. This was like 3 or 4 years ago when I was running for chairman of the state party, and I just talked about how, you know, the Capitol people weren't really doing things right. I never mentioned David Ralston, but one state rep got up from the back of the room and yelled out something like, "David Ralston's a good man, he's not a bully." And I just remember standing there, and I had never mentioned his name, and I just was shocked. But that's the type of, I think, fear a lot of state representatives have, is that if they stand up to him, they will get attacked. And some of them lost committee chairmanships. I know that I think the state rep in this area, Colton Moore, is not a fan of Ralston, which is probably why he's being primaried. I mean, that's the thing to always remember, is that when you see incumbents getting primaried, it's either, it could just be a citizen wanting change, but a lot of times it'll be someone put up by someone with money because they don't like what's going on at the Capitol. It's usually because they're acting too conservative. It's a Republican primary. The only other option is if the RA is putting up somebody, in which case I'll let that come out. Yes, sir?
That's 2 people.
2 people. Oh, Colton does? 2 people running against him?
And maybe more.
At least 2? And are they backed by the usual suspects?
Yes.
Yeah.
What are local politicians?
Oh, by the local politicians? Imagine that. Like,
State politicians.
state politicians too, they're doing, yeah. I mean, and that's the issue. But the way to counteract it, and the only way to really counteract it, because they have a statewide network, right? I mean, David Ralston doesn't represent this district, but he's sending money in. He doesn't represent Ken Pullen's district, but he's sent money in. What we need to do as conservatives is we need to be working together with all different groups, like the Transparency Coalition with the GRA, but we also need to be tied together from around the state so that the people from North Georgia and South Georgia and Central Georgia, everybody knows that this is going on, and we could pool resources, both through the PAC, our volunteers, through the Republican Assembly, through our convention, and just being in contact with each other so that the people in Atlanta, because I mean, like in DeKalb County, I'll be shocked if we have a Republican running, but we do have 20 or 30 members there, and some of them may have some money to help out with things and could spend time volunteering, but they need to know what's going on up here with Colton. And then if there's a special election, like the one of Philip Singleton, that's the most recent special election. The Philip Singleton, an RA member who the local assembly down there endorsed, beat Sackerson. I mean, I forget her full name, but she's the daughter of Lynn Westmoreland, like, and was backed by the usual suspects.
Our state senator.
Yeah, and David Ralston was supporting her. All these people were supporting her, and Philip Singleton won. Like, we got him elected. Like the PAC, he gives us a lot of credit for it. You can talk to him online. Like, he's a conservative, and he won. But he won because of the statewide attention and network. Because again, every time these elections happen, the establishment will pull their resources and target our people, like people who would agree with your philosophies, our philosophies. We need to be doing the same thing. And that's where I see the vision of the Republican Assembly and what we have been doing and want to do in the future, and we need your help to do it, is to pool those resources. So we're all in contact, we all know what's going on, and we can counterbalance these moneyed interests who, they don't want lower taxes. They can say they're Republican all day, every day, but I actually serve as a volunteer on the Georgia for Fair Tax Board. And one thing that I've heard before is that with the fair tax, all of you have heard of the fair tax before. One of the things that apparently that's a consideration that I heard is that the reason why the representatives at the state capitol won't want something like that to move forward is because it's not revenue neutral. And as a Republican, I'm thinking, oh, so you'd want it to lower taxes. No. The point is that if it cuts down government revenue, they don't want to look at it. And of course, that's what the fair tax would do, is it would cut government revenue. And they say, well, we won't look at it then. Like, it has to be revenue neutral. Now again, this is obviously hearsay, hearing it from one person to another, but that's what goes on, is that they don't want to lower taxes. They don't want to cut spending. That's not in their mindset. So what we need to be doing as Republicans is not just saying, well, that's okay, they're Republican elect, like, we just need to keep voting. Like, keep voting until, we get tired of voting. No, we need to find a way to beat them, to get people in office that will lower taxes. We need to, if, Matt Gertler pushes a constitutional carry bill to allow everyone to carry their firearms. Well, I mean, that's not going to happen. Like, we can't just say, oh, well, that'll never go anywhere, because that's what you'll hear from people. That can't be what we do. We need to go and get more people elected that will back that bill. We can't just say, oh yeah, well that's too radical. It's not radical. Other states have it. I mean, it's no more radical than, well, I mean, actually it's, it's less radical. I mean, see, when the left's going around saying that, a background check would stop a school shooting, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So, any other questions?
Where does Ralston get this money to fund these challenges?
I'm going off memory. It's all available online. It's all available at the Georgia media.ga. I think it's media.sos.ga.gov, but it's all publicly available at the Georgia Transparency Commission website. You can go to his page and look at contributors, and it has a whole long list. It's mostly PACs and it's companies and PACs. That's where the money comes from, and probably a few individual donors that, when they list their profession, it's like CEO of such company. I mean, it's all that's the vast majority of the donations. I think there are very few small donations like the ones.
It's hard to trace money to a PAC because they're not subject to open record or.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whoever started them, unless they listed themselves as the
listed. Yeah, listed as a donor, but also, I mean, some of them are just blatant. I mean, I think, I can't be sure about this, but I think I saw Delta Airlines on there, like, you know, Home Depot, like big corporations will always give. I mean, he gets a lot of money, Chamber of Commerce, yeah, I mean, yes, sir.
What about, you were talking about putting pressure on these representatives. Like, we've got a real clown here in Catoosa County, I think, this Dwayne Hill. I've written him several times, he never responds. So I think if we could get people in this county, or Walker County too, all together, and we can all send him letters or whatever, pressure his ass to do something about Ralston.
Yeah, letters, phone calls, and the best thing to do possible, primary him. Have somebody primary him. It's a $200-300 fee. I mean, one, it will scare them. Two, you might win. Three, they're going to spend the money on themselves versus funneling it off to go in, like, you know, against Colton Moore or Matt Gertler or someone, which is what they also do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, we used to have these, phone, people would call people. Phone trees, yeah, if we had something like that, where we could all call him.
Exactly.
That'd wake him up.
Yeah.
You get 30 calls in one day or something.
Austin put a lot of money into his campaign last time.
They're
Oh, really?
related, they're
related,
cousins.
yes, they're cousins.
He's his cousin.
Ralston,
Dwayne Hill.
Oh, really?
Dwayne
Yeah,
Hill,
they're
they're cousins. Ralston put a lot of money into that.
That face,
No.
Tom's face.
But I mean, that's what we need. We need to, and that's what we're trying to organize, is trying to get like the everybody targeting specific areas in order to really put pressure on them, because that's the only way that leadership will change. The one good thing is that luckily some of the elected, some of the other state reps want to be speaker. So that's one thing that David Ralston needs to consistently be worried about is, you know, someone might be running who's comparatively less bad.
Why does Ralston want to stay there so badly? Just power?
I mean,
The House Speaker has a lot of power in our constitutional structure.
Yeah.
I mean, they appoint people to, like this marijuana, cannabis, whatever you wanna call it, grow commission, that he gets 2 appointees to that. And, you know, that means that there are gonna be people vying for his attention, you know, by cutting him big checks so that maybe they get appointed to the Cannabis Commission. And so,
well, yeah, though there's a lot. I mean, and I was going to try to do a explanation of it, but it was actually too many. I looked up before coming the where Ralston sent donations, because you can search by who he contributes to on the ethics site, and I just went back trying to figure out just a general pattern over the past. I put in like 5 years who, you know, anybody named Ralston gave to. It came back with something like 30. I think it was something like 30 or 50 pages, and almost all of them were max out multi-$1,000 donations. I mean, the amount of money that you get by, I guess it's sort of a self-fulfilling thing. If you're speaker, you control what bills get brought up, which ones don't, because you know, in influence, control the committee heads. So the amount of money that goes to you and then you can send back out is pretty astronomical. And then you look at the allegations regarding the way he was dealing with legislative leave. That's the other thing. I mean, you can, when you're speaker, you definitely have a lot more, I mean, I guess you could claim a lot more excuses is probably part of it to delay cases. I mean, as an attorney, that's, that's really ripe for abuse, and it makes us look bad.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'll get back to you, Charles. Yeah.
I encourage people to go to the Ethics Commission, it's Transparency Finance website, and you can look up any representative, any senator, any elected official at the state level, and you can bring those reports up, contributions and expenditures separate. And you don't have to print out 50 or 60 pages. You can download that to an Excel spreadsheet, and you can sort it and find out where the money's coming from and where the money's going. I just recently downloaded one on one of our local representatives, or elected officials, from 2008 through 2018. and it's amazing. They're using money down in South Georgia to try to influence peddling. Exactly what it is. They're paying campaign workers in Dallas, Georgia, somebody that has no interest in Dallas, Georgia. And I encourage people to go look that up because it's an eye-opening experience. And there's some, I really question our ethics. I know they got in trouble once because I worked for the city of Chickamauga, and I used to talk to the lady who was over that, and when she tried to cover up for Deal, she lost her job. And I talked to her probably on a quarterly basis. And I'm not sure what we've got in there right now. That's a very sensitive area because you can get someone that's beholden to a senator or a representative in there. And when they look at those reports, from what I've seen, either they don't know what they're doing or they don't care, because some of it is so obvious.
Oh yeah, I mean it's interesting because I have some friends that from other countries, and their families came from other countries. And what's really interesting is that, I mean, the line between, you know, when you hear of like bribery, right? I mean, just putting it on a website and then letting everybody see it and calling it campaign ethics and campaign finance doesn't really change it any. I mean, if your votes are based on where you're getting money, I mean, it may not be illegal. It may not be like the legal crime of bribery, but to a general everyday person, I mean, if you're acting based on where you're getting paid from, I mean, that's what it looks like.
Illegal, immoral, or fattening.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of them have gotten fat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's an industry around politics. I mean, before I got involved, I thought, you know, politics was all about like the noble pursuit of just getting better government and, you know, by the people and down the line. But then what you really start to learn is that there's an industry around this. When you hear about $1 billion being spent on the last presidential election, that means that people, like individual people in their companies, got paid $1 billion based on the election. So there's a lot of money, and a lot of it's wasted. A lot of it goes to different consulting, marketing, lobbying groups, and straight down the line all the way to the state level. The one thing that's also interesting, and this is just factually interesting, is that the previous party chairman, not the current state party chairman, the current state party chairman's David Schaefer, and seems to be, from our evaluation, seems to be keeping his promises. If anyone thinks he hasn't, let me know and we'll look into it, because, you know, just because we endorsed him doesn't mean we wouldn't change our mind if he wasn't doing the right thing. But the one before him was a guy named John Watson. I don't know if many of you knew this, but he's actually a lobbyist who had given money to Democrats, which was shown on the campaign disclosures. One of the current, and there's nothing, you know, everybody needs to make their money, nothing against lobbyists, but when you have people that make their money off politics and lobbying leading a volunteer organization, it does change who gets called out and who doesn't. Or it could show that appearance and be demoralizing. And then also the 11th District Chairman, the current 11th District Chairman who sits on the State Executive Committee for the GOP is also a lobbyist who had given money to Democrats. He hasn't done so lately, but I did put out some emails about that over the previous years. But when it comes down to that ethics side, it's very, very useful. It's surprising what you'll find on there. You will not.
The individual will probably notice more than the ethics committee.
That what?
The individual voters.
Oh yeah.
Looking at it will notice more than the ethics commission.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing is the ethics commission doesn't. I mean, there isn't really much regulating.
People,
yeah.
And they're supposed to be a watchdog to be sure that something's not being abused, and it's being abused right under their nose.
Oh yeah.
And you're talking about where donations come from. When Stacey Abrams was running for governor, I downloaded a lot of her contributions, and they were coming from London, they were coming from Vietnam, a lot of interesting places, Australia, and I question why someone in London or Australia or Vietnam would be contributed to Stacey Abrams' governor's race.
That's pretty brazen, and I think that's, I thought that it was illegal to take donations from overseas, because no, when I ran for, in 2010, while I was still in law school, I actually ran for state senate. I had a friend from out of the country who wanted to donate money to my campaign, and I had to tell him no, because of that, when I looked it up then, it was illegal.
It's a federal thing, I'm not sure it's a state.
Yeah, but I think the federal law would apply to state races. It doesn't. You can, for state races, you can raise money
Well,
overseas.
I know in certain cases like corporations, like at the state law, on state races are different from the federal. So you can't always assume that the federal laws will apply. This may be one of those.
Yeah, I thought that it was, but I mean, we can look it up somewhere. Yes, sir.
Is your ethics organization predominantly in the form of finance, or is it, you guys investigate inherent conflicts of interest?
With what? You saying the Republican Assembly? What
Yes. Well, no, the state ethics.
Oh, state ethics.
Well, you guys too, for that matter. Are conflicts of interest that aren't directly related to campaign finance looked into?
Well, and that's the thing is, I think that my understanding of the Ethics Commission, I'm not an expert on the Ethics Commission by any means. My impression of what the Ethics Commission does is it was just set up just sort of to make sure people file their forms on time and then publish the results to the public, which I think that they made it that way. You know, they punish people who violate the laws based around the filings and usage of money, but I think it usually gets brought to them. And a lot of those, I mean, I had a good friend of mine who ran for office, and you know, sometimes people file baseless ethics complaints against people in order to create a news story, even when it's completely unfounded, because the Ethics Commission then opens an investigation to see if there's, you know, anything there. But then, you know, the day the complaint's filed, the other campaign puts out, you know, $10,000 worth of ads saying ethics investigation opened. So I think they really are just sort of neutral tool that are used by whoever is interested in doing it. I don't think they look into conflicts at all. That's something for the voters to do.
Actual violations are administrative or procedural errors in the process, the documented process.
Yeah, they'll catch that, or if someone accuses them, like if you file a complaint saying so-and-so candidate used campaign money for personal expenses, they'll look into it. But I mean, usually those things are, you know, I mean, it's all public. I mean, who's ever going to actually blatantly do that? I mean, it's usually just someone's doing it in order to start a fight. But I mean, one day maybe there'll be some ethics with teeth, like one that's completely independent, that's not reliant on the legislature or the governor for their appointment or money.
Another thing, if you want to know whether your local elected officials are filing their reports on time, there's also a late filer report on there. It tells you can actually print out an invoice on how much they owe.
Oh yeah, yeah, and fines. No, a lot of them just ignore turning in their forms.
We've got some up here too.
Yeah, I believe it. Oh. Yes, sir.
When Jeff Sessions' seat was open for special election in Alabama, the Democrats brought in people from out of state for the special election, from Illinois especially, to register to vote in Alabama, coupling them with an address of a person already living in Alabama. You only have to be registered 30 days before an election. So they were able to come back and vote in the election, and while they're over there, while they were bussed in there, they were able to campaign. So it served a dual purpose. That's why there were so many people over there campaigning against the Republican candidate.
Wow.
And the unions, that's the union ploy, what they do. Socialist union leadership in America, what they do in Detroit and Chicago. So that's where they get that expertise from.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats have a lot of money being spent to push their candidates. Yes, sir.
What's your form of education and communication between your members, and how does that flow throughout the state?
Well, we have, there's a couple. First, we send out statewide email blasts either through MailChimp or Gmail, and sometimes both if things really need to get out, because we know how a lot of political things get filtered now by a lot of email programs. We also have local chapters around the state. If there's more than 10 members in one county or 15 in multiple counties that are contiguous, we try to get them to have a convention, start a local chapter that's self-governing, and then each president of the local chapters sits on the state board, the GRA state board, and then we communicate with them to the members. We just had a board meeting last week, and that's the other way that we communicate.
Board members were there?
Well, we have total on the board, I think we have about 20 now, 19 or 20, and about, I think, 11 or 12 showed up. We also on the board are non-voting members or committee heads, so that changes the numbers. I think the voting members are like about 19. But we have committees that are leading various efforts, like there's a marketing committee, one dealing with Ralston, one dealing with vetting, one dealing with technology. I mean, and they're all volunteers, so that's where one for the website. So it's all on the members, but it's going really well. We have a lot of really good people throughout the counties. I know that there are a number of officers from the local Republican Assembly in the room tonight, but yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Physical meetings and virtual meetings?
We do a lot of virtual, a lot of our executive committee votes, our statewide officers do votes through text message. We do a lot of discussion and such through GroupMe, text message, email. We also do that with board meetings. We do occasionally have some in-person board meetings. My philosophy has been that it's good to have people in the same room together, because again, a lot of great people in North Georgia don't know the people from South Georgia, and it's important, for them to see each other. So we have maybe one in-person meeting, and then we also have the state convention every year. We have a convention where all of our members are invited once a year.
The Atlanta area?
We had one in Coweta, one in Kennesaw. We're gonna try moving them around the state as possible. We've been lucky in the past. We usually get very low-cost venues to be fiscally conservative with dues money, so it's usually been under $500 to have the convention. We do have a dinner coming up in January. We don't have all the details yet, but we have a yearly, pretty nice dinner down in Cobb County, the annual President's Dinner. I think this year it might be on the 21st of January, and we usually get a good speaker, have some good food. Probably only an hour from you guys, straight down 75. I think this year we might be doing it in North Cobb, so it might be easier for people from here to get to. But yeah, so most of them virtual, but some in person, because again, I want everyone to know each other, because you're more likely to help people you know and see. Yes, sir.
You just talked about the T-Splosh that was defeated up here earlier, which Joanne, a lot of them had your organization help make that happen, but a lot of that has been driven by the ACCG in Georgia. And I don't know how much you know about that or not, because I'd like to learn more, because who drives that, who's the big influencer over that, who sets the policies, they're apparently trying to, like the T-Splosh is being pushed statewide in the county, but it's coming out of that ACCG.
Oh yeah, the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I've dealt with them some based on, because again, as I mentioned earlier, I sue like government employees and the government when they violate people's rights. ACCG also helps provide, I think, insurance or defense for counties that are sued for violating people's rights, including, violating people's First Amendment rights by not allowing comment legally. That's a new one. But the ACCG, I don't know a lot about their exact makeup, but I do know think about their money. Because where I always go back to in politics now, because it's an industry, is follow the money. So look at the ACCG. A lot of times the county, these county managers, remember there are a lot of county managers that county commissioners listen to. There's the same thing in cities. There's city managers that a lot of city council members listen to. And a lot of times the council won't disagree with the managers. Now think about why for a second. These people went to school for 4 to 8 years to become a city or county manager. They then turn around, and if you're one of them and you're wanting your career, think about your career, right? So if you're let's say you're in Macon, where do you want to be next? Good to see you. you go from Macon, and then what do you want to do after Macon? Well, you obviously want to move to Atlanta, or you want to move to Cincinnati, someplace you'll make more money, you can do more. So how do you do that? Well, I mean, I would think, if I was in that position, I would want to build, like, get the biggest buildings, the newest roads, renovate everything. How do you do that? You need money. So you get it through a splost. So their mindset is, well, if we want to do all of these amazing things, we need money to do them. So that's where I think it comes from on a very core level. That's my theory. I have not interviewed someone to walk through that. A lot of people probably wouldn't admit it in those words. They'd probably say, well, we're making the county better, we're making the cities better, we're making the state better. That's the mindset. Though, I mean, the thing to remember is that the politicians aren't sitting there thinking, I'm going against my constituents, I'm doing something bad. In their mind, they're doing something great. They're using their power by taking your money to do something that they think will be great, which is taking away your free will and saying it's theirs, and they're going to do something benevolently for you. I mean, that's where I disagree with them. Like, I get the mindset. They think they're doing something good, but what they're really doing is, I mean, they aren't really being Republican. They're going directly against the philosophy by saying, oh no, this is about me doing this great thing with your money. Like, that's wrong. But I think that's where it comes from, is this desire to have more money, more revenue to play with, to do things with that hurts everyone. I mean, that hurts our philosophy, hurts the Republican brand. I mean, that's the reason why I think ultimately if we don't change things, we're going to lose to the Democrats. It's not because people really believe in the Democrat philosophy. It's just that every time you have Republicans that take your money or want to take your money through sploss and tax increases, it makes it so there's less of a distinction between our fiscal policy and the Democrats. The more that we have Republicans betraying our principles. So
like up here we have our commissioner wanting to push special tax districts. They single out an area that, oh yeah, 1,100 residents in this area, $4 a year. That is just an example.
Oh yeah. They take the special tax area, then everyone else pays a higher tax rate.
But the citizens have no vote on that. That's just signing a resolution in a commissioner meeting.
Yeah, but then your rates go up because that district, I mean, where's that revenue coming from? Because again, that's what they're all looking at is where to get more revenue. And that's why, and what's interesting to me is that a lot of people don't realize how important local government is. Like, it has a lot more influence a lot of times than even the state. I mean, if they increase your property taxes or add splost, I mean, you're all of a sudden having a higher tax rate than Metro Atlanta. I mean, and that's really weird, right? I mean, why would you have higher taxes in a metro area?
In Walker County, we're maxed out at 8%. That's the size as it can go. It's capped at 8%.
Yeah, and that happening is why more people need to be paying attention locally, and it's why, I mean, a lot of efforts, political efforts,